Good morning and welcome to the United Nations Azerbaijan Country Team Pavilion. It's fantastic to have with us. This is day 9 of COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. And this is the 4th edition of the fireside chat with UN colleagues that are in Baku for COP29. And I have a pleasure to introduce Dmitry Mariyasin, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECE. Good morning, Dmitry.
Good morning, Vladanka. It's good to be here.
The idea of these fireside chats is really to hear from colleagues who are in Baku about the reason why they are at COP29 and what are some of the expectations. And let me pose this question to you. We talk a lot about mitigation measures, about adaptation measures, finance, and this should be the final scope. We'll see what Friday brings to us. But when it comes to mitigation measures, the transportation sector is one of the greatest polluters. How does UNECE works with member states and helps them to address this issue?
Good morning again, Vladanka. It's good to be here. The UNECE delegation has been in Baku since the very first day of the COP. I'm a new arrival. Just joined yesterday, and I must say I'm impressed. With the scale and the level of ambition of the event, including when it comes to really practically mapping what we can do to decarbonize major sectors of the economy. Transport is one of them. Transport accounts for about a quarter of emissions globally, so it is a very significant area of action. UNECE works on inland transport regulation. In fact, we are the global UN regulatory hub for all things road, rail, and inland waterways. We perform a similar function to what ICAO does for aviation and IMO does for maritime. Hence, when our member states asked what can we do to support the goals of the Paris Agreement from the perspective of UNECE Inland Transport Committee, the answer was you need a clear, practical strategy to decarbonize inland transport. You need to set targets. You need to revise regulations that govern things from how your street is designed to how your vehicle is designed to how pedestrians behave on the streets and cities are managed from the point of view of traffic management, for example, to complex issues like corridor management and how long does it take for a truck to pass through a customs checkpoint. These are the examples of work that UNECE does through regulatory and policy engagement. When I say engagement, I mean intergovernmental bodies comprised of, if you take all our transport conventions, 150 parties, 150 member states, way beyond just the UNECE region. And it means looking at the regulations and policies we have in the UNECE inland transport from the perspective of climate change mitigation. Now, you would say mitigation is not everything. So as important as setting targets for decarbonization, we find is understanding what needs to happen for cities and for transportation routes, among other very important areas, to be resilient to the shocks posed by climate change. This is where we've been working quite intensively with partners such as the Islamic Development Bank, for example, to create a GIS-based solution that literally maps all corridors that crisscross, this part of the world from connecting Asia and Europe, map them in an online tool with layers showing potential effects of floods or droughts on corridors, and then juxtaposing this vis-a-vis the financing of international financial institutions and showing which of the projects, which of the investments in transport corridors are at risk of climate change effects. So this kind of very practical work to also understand the risks on the adaptation side is also part of the Inland Transport Committee of agenda on climate. And this is just a tiny bit of what UNECE does on climate change, but I thought, I'd really highlight this and maybe mention that for the first time at this COP, this COP is special in many ways, but it is certainly the first time that we will have all three modes of transport get together. So ICAO, IMO, and UNECE get together to discuss decarbonizing transport at scale. It's happening later today, and it's a special side event of the UN, co-organized by us with ICAO and IMO. So I hope you'll be able to join us there as well.
Well, that's fantastic. And you did say this is a very special COP. This is the first climate conference that is happening in this larger part of the world and the region. So unique. There is, I would say, a lot of expectation to come with a new financial goal and strategy that will support the developing countries. But also the innovation that you mentioned and the new tools that are super practical and that can help investors are really one of the ways to facilitate climate action. So brilliant. I wasn't aware of this tool. Is this tool available now? Is the mapping done?
It's a live tool, so information is being entered in live mode. It is available to the international financial institutions and, of course, to UN colleagues. It's not fully available publicly because some data there is quite sensitive, but in general, it is available. Yes,
it's a brilliant idea. You told us what are you going to do this afternoon. What else is on your agenda, and what are you? Because after this, you're going to go to Dushanbe, to the SPECA meeting. What are you bringing back to the countries that are part of the SPECA, and what are some of the key messages to help them really think, as all of them are in process of the development of the new national determined contributions that should be economy-wide, that are dubbed basically to be the investment plans and multi-sectorial. Key messages for them going forward.
Of course. So first of all, the scope of what we do on such topics as water, transport, and critical minerals is global. So this is where UNECE, though it's a regional commission, plays a global role, and we develop regulation or policies that are relevant for countries across regions. Secondly, when it comes to what we do at COP, I think it's clear that at this time around, with the presidency, with the COP29 presidency, we were engaged in two main tracks, energy and water. And this is where UNECE was a core supporter of the COP29 presidency initiatives. We were behind the green energy corridors and then the green hydrogen initiatives of the presidency, as well as core supporters of the Baku Water and Climate Dialogue, together with UNEP, the initiative that will be launched tomorrow. When it comes to what else we're doing, we are quite engaged in the transportation sector, as already mentioned, and of course we host the only globally accepted classification of minerals at UNECE, and the so-called UN Resource Management System, which is exactly what the world needs as a very practical tool to implement the principles adopted by the high-level panel of the Secretary General on critical energy transition minerals. So this is probably the set of topics that we focus on. In terms of SPECA countries, the Special Program for the Economies of Central Asia, which brings together the 5 Central Asian countries and Azerbaijan, is a very special format. It's a regional cooperation format in a region which really needs cooperation, needs transboundary links, needs common action on such issues as water and energy, transport and trade connectivity, and many others. Very specifically, I would say, in terms of messages that we bring to the SPECA countries, is first of all, they need to treat their nationally determined contributions, and the report is due in February next year, so the NDC 3.0, they need to treat it as an opportunity to shape the future competitiveness of their economies and resilience of their societies. If it should not be seen as an obligation to report to somebody, It is their national vision. And from a UNECE perspective, we are already working with UNFCCC, with UNDP and others to make sure that, for example, these NDCs include a very strong chapter on water, often underattended, and a very strong chapter on transport and mobility, including urban mobility. There are very specific things that one can include in NDCs that can be game changers for emissions, and transport is certainly one of them. The second area which I would highlight in terms of messages to our SPECA countries is that they need more finance, but not just general finance. They need smart finance. And I would focus on two specific types of finance. First, SDG aligned infrastructure investment through public-private partnerships. And we have a very specific methodology. It's called PEERS, which is basically about how do you make your public-private partnerships aligned with SDG objectives. And second one is transition finance. There is a lot of green finance which is targeting already green enterprises, already highly decarbonized sectors, already very progressive investment targets like renewable energy. And that financing should continue. But what about hard-to-abate sectors? What about small and medium enterprises that find it very hard to decarbonize their operations? What about some of the basics like energy efficiency, for which you need to have scalable, sometimes subsidized models of financing that ultimately will deliver a lot of emission reduction and also a multiplier effect for the economy. So we advocate with countries to look at transition finance as a very important area of work, and this is in fact one more topic that UNECE is promoting at COPs, starting from Glasgow, as well as this time in our special event with the climate champions.
Dmitry, thank you very much for spending the morning with us, shedding some light on the role of UNECE and how you're going to take forward some of the key messages coming out of COP29.
Thank you, Vladanka.